Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. I'm here with two more tags. People keep tagging me and I appreciate it. Thank you. Giving me some good material for Tuesday. Ike's doing his tea kettle impersonation again. I think he just left. Zelda's here under the desk as usual. So I thought I would do these two tags. I'll leave time signatures in the show notes down below so you can watch either one of the tags you want to if you don't want to watch them both. One tag is the Cryptid Tag from Steve Donoghue, and the other is the Final Exam Tag from a new great booktuber named Courtney Ferriter. Zelda's just seen a squirrel across the road, so we'll see how this goes. Anyway, so I'm going to do the Cryptid Tag from Steve Donoghue first. So, cryptids are those kind of legendary, mythical creatures that live in the woods or the mountains or in wild areas that are either animals or humanoid in shape or something like that. And there's like, you know, Bigfoot would be an example of this, and there's an endless world on YouTube and other places of people obsessed with Bigfoot and Yeti and Chupacabra and others. And Steve chased these kind of videos down a rabbit hole last weekend and came up with the Cryptid Tag. And so I'm going to do that tag. I have the prompts here on my phone because, you know, Steve Donoghue, brevity is not necessarily Steve's forte. So here's the Cryptid Tag. Prompt number 1, a cryptid is a mystery animal whose fans say it definitely could exist. How do you deal with books recommended to you by their fervent true believers? Well, I don't think anybody's ever recommended a book about a cryptid to me, if that's what the question means. If the question means how do you handle books that are recommended to you just by people in general who, you know, are real fans of a book or an author and want you to read it, it kind of depends. It depends on who they are. If they're a friend of mine, somebody that I respect, and if they bring me a copy of the book, then I will probably read it. I've done that a few times just because I, you know, respect, admire, like the person you know, recommending the book, even if I know it's not a book for me. If it's not somebody like that, what I often suggest that they do is that they loan me the book. Like, they'll describe a book to me, and I'll say, oh wow, I'd like to borrow that one day. This is kind of my, I guess, kind of tricky way of putting the burden on them. That if they really want me to read the book, then they will bring the book to me. And if they do, I will read it. But I found out, as you know, no doubt most of you know, most people don't like loaning books. And so I don't get a lot of offers there. And then, you know, if people keep pushing, I just say, well, I'll look into it, or I'll try to remember to pick that up, or I'll try to remember to order it. You know, occasionally I read books like that people recommend to me, even though I don't think they'll be books for me. But most of the time, I find a way to weasel out of it, which probably says something terrible about my character. Apparently, it's Honesty Day here on Bookish. Prompt number 2 says, Cryptozoology is typically mocked as a pseudoscience pursued by charlatans and scientific illiterates, and yet it's oddly fun to investigate. Name a non-cryptology kind of book that's likewise fun, though deeply, deeply flawed. I'm going to go with The Tourist by Olin Steinauer. Olin Steinauer is a writer of spy novels, and I really like this book, and I think this book was really good. And I'm not saying there's a flaw with the writing or the plot, but to me there's definitely a flaw with the way in which Steinauer treats his female characters. His female characters come in one of two types, and by the way, this is not unusual, I think, for spy novels. I just finished reading Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy by John Le Carre, and none of the women in that book are anything other than, you know, they're either weird or they're sex objects who are quickly discarded. In this book, in Steinauer's book, The Tourist, the women are either in need of rescuing, sometimes they're irrational, and if they are competent and capable, they're lesbians. I'm not saying anything about, you know, the competence of lesbians or of any member of the LGBTQ community, but it just seems odd that in Steinauer's book, for a woman to be, you know, good at her job, for a woman to be, you know, tough and capable, she can't like men, or she can't be sexually attracted to men, is what I should have said. That seems like a flaw, but, you know, I did find the book fun because I just like spy books. Let's see, prompt number 3. Cryptid Water-Monster, a favorite water-related book. So a favorite water-related book of mine, and this is my old, discarded copy I found from a library, is In the Heart of the Sea by Nathan Philbrick. In the Heart of the Sea tells the story of the tragedy of the whale ship Essex, which was sunk by a rogue whale, almost as though, the real story of Moby Dick. And, that whale, I believe, which was a bull, a male whale, attacked the ship and attacked it hard enough to sink it. So this was a really good book. If you've never read this, I highly recommend it. Prompt number 4 is a dog monster, a favorite book about a dog or a dog-like creature. So I'm just going to go with The Hound of the Baskervilles here, the Sherlock Holmes novel about a huge dog roaming the moors, terrorizing people, ripping members of family to shreds. That's going to be my book, my cryptid book about a dog monster. Prompt number 5, Cryptid Biped-Monster, a favorite book featuring a hominid who isn't Homo sapiens. So I'm not exactly sure where Zaphod Beeblebrox falls on the, what kingdom, phylum, order, class, species he is. I have a feeling he's not a Homo sapien because he has 2 heads, and Zaphod Beeblebrox is the president of the universe, galaxy, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who steals the, I forgot the name of the ship with the infinite improbability drive, which kind of makes these Douglas Adams books go. These are books I enjoy. I think they're funny. I enjoyed the old BBC series, so I'm going to choose Zaphod Beeblebrox as my humanoid cryptid, or my non-Homo sapiens cryptid. Prompt 6 is an avian-monster, a favorite book featuring a bird. This was really hard for me. I found out I don't read a whole lot of bird books, but since we are kind of talking about cryptids here, I decided to use a story for this prompt by Gabriel Garcia Marquez called An Incredibly Old Man with Enormous Wings. I believe that's the name of it. I always get the name kind of screwed up. It's a very old man with enormous wings who essentially, some villagers in this small community find a man with huge wings who is collapsed on the beach, and they take him to their community and they assume he's an angel. It's one of my favorite Gabriel Garcia Marquez stories, so that is my book featuring an avian monster, the angel from A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Prompt number 7 is a cryptid cat monster, a favorite book featuring a cat. And it's extra points, the cat is terrifyingly enormous. Again, this was hard for me, and my first reaction was to choose The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov because of the enormous demon cat in there. But I mention that book all the time, so I decided to go to a book which I mention a little less often, and that's actually The Snow Leopard, a work of nonfiction by Peter Matheson, in which he is essentially in search of the incredibly elusive snow leopard. And the snow leopard, is almost takes on the quality of myth in that book, which even though the snow leopard is definitely real and not a cryptid at all, it kind of, I think, qualifies in this category. So I went with the snow leopard. And then prompt number 8 is, are you in fact a cryptid? Give yourself 1 point for each yes. So before I do that, I forgot to tell a story. This is a really short story about my own cryptid situations. So when I was in elementary school, the school I went to sat on a lot which was kind of fringed by woods, not incredibly deep woods, and not a forest by any stretch of the imagination. There was this fringe of woods. I don't know, maybe 100 yards wide all the way around, or around 2 sides of the playground, and we had an enormous playground at the elementary school I went. You could get, a long way away from your teachers and get up to all kinds of stuff, which me and my friends certainly did. And the rumor at my elementary school when I was a kid was that there was a man who lived in those woods and who hid out in trees and watched little kids, and we called him Monkey Man. So Monkey Man was a legend at my elementary school, and we oftentimes, particularly 5th and 6th grade boys, would go off into that fringe of woods during recess and claim we were going to hunt out and find Monkey Man. And of course, there were always these sightings which couldn't be confirmed, which, sent girls and boys screaming from the woods and to tell the teacher that we'd seen Monkey Man, and that was my own kind of cryptid story. I meant to mention that during the hominid cryptid prompt, but I forgot. So here we go. Are you in fact a cryptid? This is like figuring out if you are a cryptid. Give yourself 1 point for each yes. So question number 1, are you often met by disbelief or even horror by those who encounter you? The answer to that is yes. I don't know how you remember your teachers, but I've been a teacher for 31 years, and whenever one of my students sees me out in public, they are incredibly shocked to find me at, mundane places like the grocery store, as though, I really shouldn't be there. And there's, then the next day, if they come to class and they talk about having seen me in some weird place, and, they definitely react in horror if they see me wearing shorts in warmer weather. So I would give myself a point for that. Then question number 2, are there people in the world who consider you mostly or entirely mythical? I would go with my wife's work colleagues. Being an introvert and not really being really uncomfortable socializing with a group of people. I don't know. I don't go to a whole lot of events, so many of them may think I'm mythical. Question number 3, is there anything about you that science finds puzzling? I have weird little pinky toenails. There's almost no quick to my little pinky toenails, and so they have a tendency just to kind of fall off or get ripped off when I'm, taking on and off my socks. I'm not sure that qualifies. I'm going to give myself a point there. So far, I'm 3 for 3. Question number 4 in this, are you in fact a cryptid? In your natural state, do you typically emit odd noises or odors? The older I get, the more true this is. Grunting noises and involuntary noises and, old man smell, I suppose, so I'm going to give myself 4. Are you an evolutionary dead end scorned by the modern world? I'm going to say no. I do have a wife. I do have 2 kids. I can't be an evolutionary dead end, I don't think. And then the last question is, do you occasionally exhibit near human levels of intelligence? According to Steve, once every 3 to 4 months I exhibit some near human level of intelligence with something I say on BookTube. So yes. So if there are there are 6 prompts, I got 5 out of 6 points. Steve's recommendation is, or his order is, that I should immediately gather up samples, saliva, poop, to send to some kind of natural history lab so that I can be examined for the cryptid that I am. Okay, there you go. There's the cryptid tag. Oh, I'm going to tag some people to do this tag. I'm going to tag. Wow, I can't read my own handwriting. I'm going to tag Brianna from Brianna's Library because she seems like the kind of person who would really enjoy kind of going down a cryptid rabbit hole. Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, because she does a lot of her videos outside, and so I wonder if she's out there looking for Bigfoot. Heidi from My Reading Life, because she lives in Maine and there are bound to be some pretty cool cryptids from Maine. And then Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader, because she lives in Colorado, and I'm pretty sure there's some good cryptid stories from Colorado. So there you go, that's the cryptid book tag. Okay, so the next tag is the final exam tag. This was created by Courtney Ferriter. She's a great new booktuber. I always like it when new booktubers create their own tags early on, because I think it's a good way for them to really tell you something about themselves and what they do, and interject a little bit of their personality into BookTube right off the bat. So these are questions related to her teaching. She's a college level instructor of, I want to say, writing or composition. Anyway, so again, I'm going to be reading her prompts off my phone, if I can remember how to access my pictures. Old man problems. Let's see, here we go. So prompt number 1, name a book at the end or toward the end of a series that you felt finished the series on a strong note. I'm going to go with The Ghost Road, the 3rd in the Regeneration series of novels by Pat Barker. While I think the other 2 might be strong on the whole, this was a good, strong finish, and as everybody, I think most people on BookTube will tell you, this is a great series of books, and that Regeneration series is really, really good. And it makes me wish now, and I keep saying I'm going to read more Pat Barker, even though I haven't. Prompt number 2 is name a book that was instrumental to your understanding of a complex issue. I'm going to go with Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe, an attempt by an actual physicist to explain string theory to non-physicists. And I thought this did a really good job. And when I read it, I definitely felt like I understood string theory. And, you know, what I know about string theory is still largely based on this book. If you didn't know, one of my kind of secret but rarely indulged in... One of my kind of secret but rarely indulged in reading loves is to read books about science that are kind of intended for non-scientific thinkers, and that kind of really started... stop please. That kind of really started with Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe, and so I credit that book for whatever understanding of string theory I have. By the way, in school I hated science. I didn't think I could do science, I didn't understand science, and I really wish I'd taken more science classes now. That's something that I do actually have an interest in. Prompt number 3 is share a book that does a particularly good job of examining the natural world. This again is one of those areas in which I don't do a lot of reading. I mentioned The Snow Leopard, which kind of gives a really great description of the natural world in the Himalayas in my last tag, so I didn't want to do that again, so instead I went with John Krakauer's Into the Wild. I think this does a really great job of describing, you know, how inhospitable Alaska and wild Alaska is to humanity, to human beings, by telling the story of, what's his name, Chris McCandless, who dies by trying to live essentially off the grid in Alaska, and gives you a really good portrait of exactly how, and I think this is one of the things it reminds you of, is how much the natural world can get along without us, and can even, you know, in some ways, even though it's not by design, present all kinds of dangers to us. Prompt number 4 is a 3-parter. It says rhetorical appeals. Share 3 books, fiction or nonfiction, one that made persuasive use of logic, one that was highly credible, and one that made a good use of emotion. So, the book I chose for persuasive use of logic is An Indigenous People's History in the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. This essentially, as the name implies, discusses the history of the United States and the settlement of the United States from the point of view of Native Americans, and it recasts and redefines how we think about people that we, in American history, frequently call pioneers, who really were imperialist colonizers, whether they were the people on the Mayflower or at Jamestown, or Daniel Boone, or whoever. It really, I think, fairly persuasively and logically makes that argument, even though it is also a book that is deeply emotional, and there is an undercurrent of actual anger that runs through this, which seems to be justified, but also I think really logical. Let's see, so that was one of the 3 books. The second book is one that is highly credible. I just went, being kind of a historian, I went with the book that I thought was really well documented, and that would be Matthew J. Broccoli's biography of F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's called Some Kind of Epic Grandeur, The Life of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and there are fairly extensive notes. Mr. Broccoli is I believe he used to be, if he's not still, essentially the curator and the guy who put together the F. Scott Fitzgerald collection. I believe it's at the University of South Carolina. He definitely seems an expert, and his book is well documented, so I'm going to say that one's credible. And then the third book in this prompt was a book that made a good use of emotion. I'm going to go with the short kind of essay called Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions by Valeria Luiselli, which essentially tells the story of her work as a volunteer translator for kids who crossed the border on their own, or kids who came across the border illegally between the United States and Mexico on their own and are attempting to get some kind of asylum or residency here in the United States. Really emotionally powerful, really well done, really well organized. I thought, a great book on that subject. See, prompt number 5. Tell us about a book that sparked an intense conversation or discussion between you and someone else. Well, I only have intense conversations about books here on BookTube, so I'm going to mention 2 books that have prompted, intense discussions and conversations. The first would be this book, The Road, by Cormac McCarthy. This was the source of a lot of BookTube discussion last year, I believe in the summer, about whether this was a good book or a bad book, with forces lining up on either side and making their appeals about whether or not The Road was good or bad. I have to be honest with you, I come down more or less in the middle. If you were to ask me, and you know that I read Cormac McCarthy, if you follow this channel, if you were to ask me if I think that The Road is a great book, I'm going to tell you no. I don't think it's McCarthy's best work. I do think there are a lot of things about it that don't make sense, but I have a tendency to see The Road as an allegory for the survival of humanity in an increasingly hostile world that we are creating on our own. And so I'm going to forgive it some of its lack of realism from time to time. And so I'm not as hard on as other people, but I'm also not a huge fan. And then this year for Victober, I reread Wuthering Heights, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like it the first time I read it. I didn't like it the second time I read it. I posted a review of Wuthering Heights in which I talked about how I didn't like it, and I got a lot of great comments, and other people who read it made videos. It seemed like a lot of people were reading Wuthering Heights last year for Victober, so I got a lot of great feedback. Got to hear a lot of other people's opinions. Got to break down, why I didn't like it, and other people, explaining why they thought it was effective and it worked. And it was a really good discussion, which is, one of the great things we have here on BookTube. And then prompt number 6 is tell us about a book that left you thinking about it long after you finished it. This is a book that I read for the BookTube Prize in Nonfiction Group C, Solitary, by Albert Woodfox. This is about an African-American man in Louisiana who was kept essentially in solitary confinement for more than 40 years of his life, essentially kept that way for a crime that he had been framed for in the prison system itself, in which everybody knew he wasn't actually guilty, and yet the system itself worked against him being freed, and people within that system, Louisiana state government, tried to, for reasons that I'm still not sure of, tried to keep him, other than political reasons, tried to keep him in prison. And I still think about it. I still think about it when we see examples of injustice in our justice system involving African Americans and other minority groups in the United States. It's just a really powerful book, and I still am thinking about it. So then let's see. Prompt number 7 is tag others to take this final exam. So the people I chose to take the final exam are people who I believe are relatively close to, are still in school or have just recently finished school. Steve Donoghue, I'm tagging you. I know 28 is a little old to still be in school, but clearly you're still some kind of a graduate student with all the reading of the classics you do. You're bound to be near an advanced degree in the classics by now, so I'm going to tag you to do this tag. Lukash from Totally Pretentious, I know you're still in school pursuing an advanced degree, I believe, in psychology. Is that right? Tiffany from Hierarchy of Reads, I'm also tagging you. Believe that you're still in school, and I think you're also pursuing a degree in psychology or counseling. And then David Murphy, everybody's favorite BookTube, I believe libertarian economist. I'm going to tag you because I believe you're still in school seeking, what is it, your 5th master's degree in finance or economics or something like that. So I'm tagging those people. Hope you'll do the tag. It was really fun. I like the questions. A pretty unique take on some things that are usually in tags. So thank you, Courtney, for tagging me. Leaving links to Steve's original tag video down below and to Courtney's original tag video down below, along with the prompts. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the tags. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and as always, thank you for watching.